off, because this is a public meeting, the chat has been turned off. If you're a member of the GRC and you have questions or comments, please click your little raise your hand button and we'll call on you, and have those good conversations. If, as a GRC member, if you have any direct questions for the applicants, we are going to ask that you direct those to staff at the CJC, probably starting with yours truly. I firmly believe in not making people public speak on the spot, and so we're not going to do that to our applicants. So if you have any questions, we will do our best to answer, and if we can't, we'll reach out to applicants as needed. And then as we're going through, we did not, as staff, find any conflicts of interest. However, if as we're going through the presentation, if you feel there is one, please just let me know before I begin presenting on that individual court. If you are not a member of the GRC, but you really want to say something, please know there will be an opportunity for public comment towards the end of the presentation. However, a friendly reminder that on these, we cannot answer questions. So it'll need to be a comment. And if you can keep it to 2 minutes or less, that would be greatly appreciated. And then just for the record, today's overall purpose is to provide funding recommendations to the Commission for final approval of funds for all of the implementation court applicants. So with all that exciting stuff out of the way, I was hoping that we could start with some introductions, since for me, this is my first time seeing many of you face to face over a computer. As I said, my name is Adeline and I am the Specialty Court Grant Coordinator. And I was hoping we could go around to our GRC members. And if you can just let me know your name and where you work, and any other pertinent information you think we should know, I'd love to hear it. And Joe, since you're first on my screen, we're going to start with you.
Joe Garcia, Director for Douglas County Community Corrections. I've been on the grant review committees for specialty courts since I think we started them. So it just means I'm old. So, but glad to participate as always. So thank you for having me.
Thanks. Lisa, do you want to go next?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Lisa Nichols. I work for the Oregon Health Authority. I work in adult behavioral health and I manage forensic intensive services unit. And then I have a background in working in specialty courts around Oregon.
Amazing. Julie, you're next on my screen.
Program manager out in Columbia County, and I manage 4 different specialty courts.
Amazing. I know that RJ is on here. RJ, would you like to go?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Ramiro Navarro Jr. Most people call me RJ for short. I am a program coordinator at Fortaleza a Través Barreras, and have about, I'll say about 14 years experience in the criminal justice field.
Amazing. Thanks for being here. Rachel Mark, would you also introduce yourself for the record?
I would love to. Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel Mark. I'm from OJD. I work on our treatment court team. I am here just in case there are any questions related to our treatment courts that I may be able to answer in real time, but I'm not part of the GRC. Thanks for letting me join, Adeline.
Of course, thanks for being here. I also just want to note that if you're looking through the participants list on this meeting today, you'll probably see Rachel MacArthur. She is in the building making sure that I don't embarrass the agency too badly and to help answer any questions that I am not able to answer. So as you all know, she was the previous specialty court coordinator. She's still at the CJC, helping keep us in line. And also just a brief, quick shout out. When we bring these to you, the person speaking might be the face of it, but there is a whole team of people behind me on the computers giving me information, helping me get this information to you all. So I just want to shout out all of them and thank them all for their support. As you see, we do have an agenda. I want to be very clear. This agenda is pretty loose. It's pretty easy. If you need a break before 11 o'clock, please, by all means, just let me know. We only have 6 applicants today, so I do think it should go pretty quickly. But again, humans are human, and I want to give you the chance to do human things when you need to. Oops. So with that, I do want to do a quick review of all our roles before we get started on this meeting. So first and foremost, the CJC staff have reviewed the applications for completeness and eligibility. So as I mentioned, we have 6 applicants today. All of them were reviewed and considered eligible. We also went through as staff and identified eligible funding requests as they relate to the solicitation. And then we welcomed all of you here. You all, as the GRC, are going to evaluate those applications' adherence to specialty court standards and adherence to the grant solicitation. We're going to talk about that solicitation a lot today. So we want to just make sure they're adhering to it. You're going to discuss applications collaboratively, and then you're going to provide recommendations for funding requests to the grantees. And then you're going to provide those final funding recommendations to the commission. So I am going to take your final funding recommendations to the commission, which meets on Monday, January 22nd. They get the final say. They're going to consider funding recommendations that you all have made as the GRC, and then make those ultimate decisions on those applications. Any questions about that? Perfect. So let's talk about eligibility. Who got to apply? So new Oregon Circuit Courts, new Oregon Circuit Court specialty courts that are in the planning phase. And when I say new, I mean a court that's not previously in operation, or it could have been operating for less than 1 year. Or they can be an existing Oregon Circuit Court that are focused on implementing or improving practices to adhere to the Oregon Specialty Court standards. And this "and" is important, they did not receive any 23 to 25 specialty court grant program funding. So again, all of the 6 applicants that we will see today have met those eligibility requirements. Applicant programs also, to be considered for the implementation court funding, needed to use Oregon Specialty Court Management System, lovingly known as SCMS. They needed to include a treatment provider that accepts OHP. And finally, they needed to agree that they would collaborate with OJD Specialty Court team to receive technical assistance, program reviews, peer reviews, etc., as they become available. So everyone has agreed to that. Okay. This is really important. This was our methodology for which eligible expenses we recommended to all of you. So I want to give a little context about this before I get into it. When we were looking at implementation courts and starting this grant program, staff went and worked with our counterparts at OJD, and we asked their coordinators to help us gauge interest. How many courts are going to be interested in applying for these funds? We were excited to learn there was a lot of interest. We had interest from over 10 parties. We ended up, for various reasons, only having 6 applying. But when we were looking at the interest, we talked again with OJD and said, what is going to be the most helpful and the most useful to these courts? So in conjunction with OJD, CJC staff decided that a coordinator and or treatment services are going to be the primary uses of funding that would support an implementation court in establishing and aligning their practices with standards. So per the solicitation, funds awarded must be used to support a court coordinator position that's again focused on adhering to those program standards, or offering treatment services through a treatment provider that aligns with best practices and again adheres to those standards. So we as staff are very aware that this solicitation is very, very specific. So again, at the risk of being redundant, any request needed to be tied directly and expressly to either that coordinator position or to treatment services. And CJC staff did not make any assumptions, so the request needed to be very, very clear in what they were asking for and in how it tied back to those 2 things. We did cap the requests. Applicants could not request more than $150,000 of available CJC funds. And this was honestly to help maintain equity for applicants and to really help curb that underspending that's really common for new courts. But I want to acknowledge that whenever we're talking about money, we all know that these courts take a lot of funding to run. And so I do want to be very clear that if they had a request that was not eligible, or if, say, as they get down the road and are, becoming successful and getting to align with those standards, they realize they need more funding for specific things. The implementation courts, like all the specialty courts, will be able to request further funding should there be a supplemental round. So they will have the same access that all the other specialty courts have to apply for that supplemental round if needed and if we do one. And then finally, as part of keeping true to the solicitation, the recommended training and travel requests, specifically mostly for the All Rise conference, were only for the court coordinator. For All Rise, we capped that at $3,000 per person for one conference per the biennium. This is the same thing that we did in the previous specialty court grant. You will notice as we go through, there is one applicant that asked for additional travel and training for additional training outside of All Rise, and we did recommend funding that, but we can talk about that more when we get there. Are there any questions about the methodology for our eligible expenses that we're recommending as staff? All right. So as we get into the 6 applicants, we did want this to be as familiar as possible. So we are presenting them alphabetically by court type, and we're going to start with our family treatment courts. So first off, we had Josephine County Family Treatment Court. They do not have any participants currently. And if, as you were going through their application, you saw them referred to as BEAR Court, that stands for Building Engagement to Achieve Reunification. They do have an established treatment provider. And one thing that staff appreciated about their application was they had really detailed plans to separately track events that aren't recorded in SCMS. That's really going to help them figure out those kind of key benchmarks in family reunification and to help them identify disparities. So for example, SCMS doesn't currently track changes in permanency plans, child placement, dates between program entry and when children are returned to their parents. The court coordinator would separately track these events and kind of allow them to see how they're doing and who they're meeting and where they're meeting their participants. And they also noted that they're going to track how many petitions are filed with substance misuse allegations that are not referred to the program. That's going to really ensure that they're reaching as many eligible participants as possible. So the eligible expenses that CJC staff recommended funding were for their CADC2, for their court and staffing representative through Grants Past Treatment Center, for their ASAM certified assessor through Grants Past Treatment Center, and for their staffing of the Family Nurturing Center. So that came to a total recommended funding of $51,153.12. Do we have any questions or thoughts that we want to talk about now? I will note that there will be a discussion portion at the end. So I leave it up to you all as the GRC if you want to talk about each court individually, or if you want to see them all and go over it then. Yeah, Joe.
Just a question in your review of these. Did you verify that these aren't billable services already? Like, what was your process, just so we're clear as we're going through all the applications?
Sure, yeah, I should have clarified for the CADC2, we actually recommended partial funding because the rate that they gave us exceeded the OHA standard rate. So we were going by OHA's standard rate.
Okay, but what I was asking is like, for all the applicants, like say it's a CADC2 and they're providing outpatient service, like how do we how are we making sure it's not something they can already bill for? Like, did we look at that across these applications? That's the question I have when you're recommending whether or not to support a request for treatment.
Yes, I think Rachel has jumped in and is going to help me.
We did, yeah, that was part of the process.
Okay.
And we looked at it. We want to make sure that everything is non-billable. And we did our best in, if we had to ask for any clarification, we did ask for clarification regarding that, and matched the rate to the OHA rate if it was over or if there was any gap. So, yes.
Okay, that helps clarify. Thank you.
Any other questions about Josephine County Family Treatment Court? All right, we'll keep going. Next up, we have Tillamook County Family Treatment Court. They are currently serving 2 participants. They're currently working with a parenting skills trainer from Tillamook Family Counseling Center, but they are in search of a clinician, and their goal is to have that clinician in place as participants progress through treatment. That clinician would be able to make inpatient referrals and then work one-on-one with participants during outpatient. For the eligible expenses for Tillamook Family Treatment Court, the staff recommend funding. That includes the treatment provider and clinician, tablets so that participants can access treatment if they aren't able to get there in person, phone cards and data, all rise conference and registration fees. So to get to that conference for training, and their total recommended funding is numbers are hard, $25,096.40. Any questions regarding Tillamook?
I have one question that is actually in general, I probably should have asked at the beginning. Procedure wise, were the counties notified of the eligible expenses versus the ask ahead of time, or is this kind of the first time that information is available?
So it was clear in the solicitation that it needed to be tied to either the coordinator position or treatment. There were a couple, I want to say 4 of the 6 counties, we did request additional information to clarify some. Yeah, does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Good, I'm 1 for 1, or 1 for 2, not bad. All right, any other questions regarding Tillamook? Next, we're going to move into our mental health courts. So the Baker County Mental Health Court is currently serving 15 participants. They do have an established treatment provider, and they were really focused on building their court through training and data collection. So they plan on coordinating with Clatsop Adult Drug Court to shadow their operations and coordination. And then they're working to improve data collection methods and input backlog data. So again, they have that accurate baseline. So staff recommended funding for Baker County Mental Health Court was for Oxford housing, for assessment fees for participants, for uninsured medical expenses for participants, and again, that training and travel for the All Rise Conference that you'll see most of our courts have requested. And then finally, I mentioned there would be a court that was asking for additional training funds. That was Baker County. This is so they can go back and forth to shadow the Clatsop County Adult Drug Court. Any questions about Baker? Yeah. Lisa.
Is the Oxford housing or is that being considered treatment?
Yeah, because
Okay.
they provide, it's treatment centered, so community-based approach to addiction recovery, and they provide a specific independent, sober living environment. So that's why you see Oxford housing versus other housing. Great question. All right. Any more for Baker? All right. Next up, we have Lynn County Mental Health Corp. They do not have any current participants, but they do have an established treatment provider. They plan to use their existing adult drug court team, and they had a really strong court development plan for the 6 months of funding that really focused on outreach, education, and training, and then creating those foundational documents. The eligible expenses that CJC recommends for Lynn County Mental Health Corp are for their program coordinator, their Lynn County Mental Health Program rep, specimen testing, medication supports, peer-delivered services, UA monitoring and processing, skills training and therapy supplies, oral swabs, and then that training and travel to the All Rise Conference for a total of $125,777.40. Questions about Lynn County? All right. Next, we have Washington County Mental Health Corp. They do have current participants. However, we don't have a number because they don't have a coordinator to put those numbers into SCMS. So we know they have participants, we don't know how many. They currently do not have an addiction treatment provider. However, they do work with the main providers in Washington County and can refer to all outpatient levels of care. And all participants have access to a 24-hour crisis care. They also have a unique program where they utilize OHSU's psychiatry rotation through their court. And then I just really want to note, they presented a really comprehensive plan to figure out who their marginalized populations were and how to best serve them. Theirs is pretty straightforward. They are requesting $150,000 total, which is an eligible expense that staff recommends funding for their court coordinator. Questions about Washington? All right. Next up, we have Clatsop County Veterans Treatment Court. They do not have any current participants, but they expect to have this court grow quickly because 8.7% of their county population holds veteran status. They do have an established treatment provider, and they had a really interesting plan to eventually add an accredited veteran service officer, peer mentor, and events attorney to team, which I thought was noteworthy because all will have lived experience as a veteran and or a member of a military family. So those folks will be coming into those positions with that lived experience. Just like Washington, they are requesting $116,730 for their court coordinator. I feel like we're going really fast, so I do want to give anyone an opportunity to ask questions. Yeah, RJ.
More of a comment, I think, than a question. But I really appreciate that they're including a veterans like benefits navigator into this. I don't think that we as a community, as a state, recognize that Oregon has one of the highest percentage of veterans who qualify for benefits but don't apply for benefits. And so being really intentional about including a veteran service officer into this treatment court, I think is really going to support people in the recovery. And so I commend Clatsop for adding that to this application.
Thank you. All right, so I have this scheduled break for 11. It is 9:30. I do want to give anyone time, but if I see like some thumbs up and some head nods, we'll keep going. I also recognize it's the Friday before a 3-day weekend. All right, we're going to keep going. So at this time, if there's any public comment, a member of the public is welcome. Just please, a friendly reminder that we're not able to answer questions. So please keep your comments to statements. If you raise your hand, we'll go through. All right, well, that was also really fast. All right, so the total CJC staff recommended funding for the implementation grants came to a total of $474,495.85, and $327,399.32 of that would be allocated to OJD. Just a nice summary of all the numbers there. So now we'll move on to any discussion for the members of the GRC. Yeah, Joe.
I would just say for me, it's a whole heck of a lot easier to review applications for implementation than it is to review applications for existing programs and all the different requests they want or whatever. So again, I'm just speaking for myself, but I kind of felt like I wasn't really contributing a whole heck of a lot. I just had that clarifying question, but in part because I was a little surprised that some of the requests were so low, considering it was an implementation grant. And so clearly some of these programs must have some infrastructure in place that they've made some commitments to, even at the smaller level, even if they have 2 participants or whatever, that they're internally making some of those efforts, which usually leads to more sustainability long-term, for programs. So I appreciate their efforts, but I almost feel guilty approving some of the requests because they're so minimal, in their asks. So that's the only reason I didn't say a whole lot. When I read them, it was pretty straightforward, and with your presentation, it's pretty straightforward too. So obviously I'd support all of them. So thank you.
Thank you.
I would really just agree kind of with what Joe was saying. I think that the new method of review is extremely helpful, makes it much more efficient and quicker to move through. And I did find that the proposals were very well thought out and direct.
Amazing.
So no further questions or clarifications needed from me.
Perfect. And I do just want to add that as these courts go through there, we are truly hopeful that there will be a supplemental round, and that they will, of course, be able to apply in there as needed if, as they get going, they find that they do need more funding. If there's not any other discussion, oh, go ahead, RJ.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to kind of echo, I think it was Joe who had mentioned earlier, the concern about courts using funding for a service that's billable. I know that this is kind of initial funds to help start up a program, and so that's where I kind of don't worry too much about that because we really want to get these programs off the ground. But in the long run, I think if there was some way that we could support these organizations in understanding that, or these applicants in understanding that there are times that the service is billable. And so how can we support them in doing that so that they can get funds, to be able to continue providing that service without these grant funds, and then reallocate these funds to something else that they couldn't, barrier funds or something that would really support some of these individuals that are going through the programs.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. And I know that is a conversation that the CJC has been having, OJD has been having, so it is definitely a conversation.
Awesome, thank you.
If there isn't any further comment, then I would love to get a vote from you all.
Would you like that in like the form of a motion or just,
Yes, please.
okay, I would move that we accept, and fund the applications or recommend funding for the applications, at the levels they've requested consistent with, CJC staff recommendations.
I'll second.
Thank you both. Also, sorry, Julie, I didn't mean to cut it off. I do want to ask in that motion, do you include the OJD allocation? So for instance, the proposed language we had was everything you said, the motion to adopt funding recommendations for each implementation court to include the allocation of county funds to OJD as specified.
Absolutely.
I'll let you two argue over who gets to second it again.
At RJ.
Awesome. Yes, I will second that friendly amendment.
Incredible. So we'll go through and do a roll call vote. Lisa,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
RJ,
Yes.
and Julie.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you all for being here and for the discussion and for your help. This was my first GRC and you were distinctly not scary. So thank you for that. I do want to remind everyone that the commission meeting is on January 22nd from 1 to 3 p.m. It is virtual. You can find the link. I don't know if it's up there yet, but it will be on our website. They will, of course, be making these final decisions, but I will bring them your feedback and your motion, and we'll go from there. I don't have anything else. Again, thank you for making this a very quick meeting. And unless you need anything from me, I hope you all enjoy your 3-day weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.